Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to tell you a story that changed my life forever, but not in the way I or anyone else thought it would. This isn't just about money, lucky numbers, or huge prizes. This is about truth, about family, and about the deep cracks hidden beneath the perfect veneer of love. Imagine this: one day you hold a lottery ticket in your hand, and suddenly your whole world is turned upside down. Not upside down in the sense that you quit your job, buy a mansion in the Hollywood Hills, or sail around the world, but upside down in a more painful way, one that forces you to look at the true nature of the people you love the most. Not long ago, I was Evelyn Reed, a 8-year-old woman living in the suburbs of Denver, Colorado. My life, stable, perhaps is the best word. I was an elementary school teacher who loved children and my job, but whose salary was barely enough to make ends meet. Every morning I woke up before dawn, made my favorite almond milk latte, and prepared for a long day with my rowdy but adorable children. Life revolved around parent-teacher conferences, tests, and worries about the mortgage, car repairs, and college tuition for my only daughter, Lily, a bright and ambitious one, 6-year-old. Lily was the light of my life, the reason I pushed through each day, even though the financial burdens sometimes left me exhausted. I often wonder, can I give her a better life, a future without worrying about money like her mother? Then came that fateful Tuesday. I still remember the way my hands trembled as I checked the numbers on the Powerball ticket I had bought over the weekend. I usually bought lottery tickets out of habit, a glimmer of hope for a miracle, even though I knew deep down what the odds were. But this time was different. One by one, the numbers appeared on the screen, matching perfectly the numbers on the crumpled ticket in my hand. 6 numbers. They added up to a jackpot of $10 million. $10 million. The world was spinning. I couldn't breathe. My heart was pounding like it was going to burst out of my chest. It was a feeling of giddiness, of joy, but also of a strange fear. Money. So much money. It could solve all my problems, the worries that had plagued me for years. It could help me fulfill my unfulfilled dreams, give Lily a bright future. But a cold thought flashed through my mind. Would it bring new problems, problems I had never imagined? In that moment, amidst the chaos of emotions, a bold decision was made. I would not tell anyone about this victory. Absolutely no one. Sounds crazy, right? But for me, who had been through so many family dramas involving money, this seemed like the only option to protect myself. My family. Well, it's a long and complicated story. We were not the warm, loving, and unconditionally supportive family you see in the movies. There was too much history, too many heartbreaks, too many unfulfilled expectations and empty promises. Money is always a sensitive subject, a double-edged sword that can cut through any bond. I recall all the times I had to dig into my pockets, sometimes my own small savings, to help my siblings, parents, and even more distant relatives. My brother Liam, a charming but directionless man, was always looking for ways to borrow money with the promise of paying it back later. My sister Sarah, who lived in the aura of a lavish lifestyle she could not sustain, often asked me to cover unexpected expenses. My parents, though not needy, tended to be judgmental and demanding rather than giving. Each time I felt taken advantage of, drained of energy and finances, but because of family ties, I could not refuse. My kindness, my vulnerability seemed to have turned me into a walking ATM in their eyes. My biggest fear was that if they found out about the $10 million, things would get a million times worse. Empty promises would turn into harsh demands, and pleadings would turn into orders that couldn't be refused. I'd read too many stories about lottery winners being torn apart by their own families, taken advantage of by their friends, and ultimately losing everything. I didn't want to be one of them. I didn't want money to change me or turn the people I called family into greedy strangers. I wanted to use this money to build a better life for Lily and myself, not to solve other people's endless problems. And so an even more daring idea came to my mind, a risky but also promising plan. Not only would I keep my victory a secret, but I would also create a hypothetical situation, a test to see who among them really cared about me, who would help me when I was really in trouble, not when they needed me. I wanted to see their true nature, not obscured by the illusion of wealth. This would be a harsh test, I know, but I believed it was necessary. I needed to know who I could trust, who was worthy of sharing my joy and my new future. Before I go into the details of this plan and what happened next, if you found this story interesting and want to hear more real-life stories of love, betrayal, and valuable life lessons, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. That really means a lot to me. Before that fateful day, my life, Evelyn Reed, could be summed up in 2 words: regular. A routine that was sometimes boring, but at least it provided a fragile sense of security. I never thought I would be rich or even financially comfortable. I was an elementary school teacher at Maplewood Elementary School in Denver. My job was filled with children's laughter doodles and the joy of seeing children progress. I loved my job, I really did. It gave me meaning, a purpose. But that love couldn't pay the bills. A teacher's salary, no matter how steady, was just a drop in the ocean of expenses for a single parent. My apartment is in a quiet area, not too far from the city center, but peaceful enough. It's a 2-bedroom, big enough for me and my daughter, Lily. It's not fancy, it doesn't have all the modern conveniences, but it's our home. I've spent years making it cozy, filled with books, Lily's paintings, and the smell of baking cookies whenever we have a spare moment. Every morning, the alarm goes off at 5:45 a.m. I'll sneak into the kitchen, make a cup of hot tea, and check my to-do list for the day. There's always a list. There's tests to grade, lesson plans to prepare, and most importantly, there's a list of bills to pay. The mortgage, the utility bill, the car insurance, Lily's extracurriculars, and the student loan debt that's been hanging over me since I graduated from college nearly 20 years ago. These numbers circled around in my head like a never-ending refrain, an invisible burden that was always present. My job didn't stop at the 8 hours of school. I often stayed late grading papers, preparing lesson plans, or attending parent-teacher conferences. At home in the evenings after Lily had gone to bed, I sat in front of my computer looking for scholarships for her, comparing prices at supermarkets, or looking for ways to save even the smallest amount of money on living expenses. I was an expert at clipping coupons, shopping for discounts, and knowing exactly which stores had the best deals on everything from toilet paper to breakfast cereal. My 2010 Honda Civic was a decade old and occasionally made strange noises when I turned a corner or hit the brakes. I dreamed of a new car, one that would be safer for Lily and me, but it seemed like a distant, impossible dream. My family, as I mentioned, is a complicated story. My parents, Frank and Carol Reed, divorced when I was 12. It was a messy divorce that left scars. Both of them remarried within a few years. My father, Frank, a retired electrical engineer, found happiness with Brenda, a real estate broker with an ostentatious lifestyle and a love of expensive designer goods. My mother, Carol, a retired nurse, married Arthur, a successful businessman who was known for being tight-fisted with every penny. I have 2 siblings. My eldest brother, Liam, is 40, a charming and articulate man who has never held down a steady job or a long-term relationship. He is always short of money, and borrowing from family has become a skill he has mastered to a frightening degree. Every few months there would be a dramatic phone call, an emotional plea, a promise to return as soon as possible, and then absolute silence until the next crisis hit. My sister Sarah, 36, is the star of the family. She graduated from a prestigious university, married David, a successful architect, and lives in a gorgeous house in a posh part of town. Sarah is always busy with parties, international trips, and taking care of her 2 perfect children. Despite her outward success, Sarah often complains about financial stress and doesn't hesitate to ask me to help with her unexpected expenses, from villa renovations to expensive gifts for her children. Even more distant relatives were no easier. Aunt Clara, my mother's younger sister, was a retired high school teacher. She lived in a small apartment filled with books and houseplants and drove a 10-year-old Subaru. Aunt Clara was the only person in my family with whom I felt a genuine connection. Despite not having much, she was always there when I needed her, listening without judgment, and always trying to help, whether it was a word of advice or a warm hug. On the other end of the spectrum was Aunt Beatrice, my father's older sister. Aunt Beatrice married a wealthy man and never let anyone forget it. Every holiday she took time to criticize other people's life choices, making snide remarks about my career, my apartment, or my single status. Her nephew cousin Mark, Aunt Beatrice's son, seems to have inherited his mother's complacency, but has had no financial success. He has a gambling problem that the family pretends not to notice, but I always feel like I'm being taken advantage of by him as he constantly borrows money to settle things. My history with financial support in my family has left me hardened. 3 years ago, when Liam needed $5,000 to enter a rehab program, I drained my small savings to help him. A few months later, I discovered he had never actually gone to treatment. When Sarah needed help with her wedding expenses, I used my credit card to pay for $2,000 that she promised to pay back after their honeymoon. 5 years later, I'm still waiting. When my father needed a loan to fix the roof after a hurricane, I sent what I could. The next month, I saw photos of him and Brenda enjoying a luxury vacation in the Caribbean. These betrayals, small and large, leave deep scars. The only person who knows the whole truth about these scars is my best friend Chloe. We met in college, and, unlike most relationships in my life, our friendship has remained strong. Chloe is a nurse. She understands the hardships of life and never judges my complicated feelings about my family. She is my voice of reason when I feel bitter, reminding me that not everyone is out to get me. She is the only person I can truly trust. At work, things weren't much better. My boss, Mr. Davies, had a habit of taking credit for my ideas in meetings with parents and colleagues. My colleague Ben would often leave early, leaving me to shoulder his responsibilities, but somehow always got the credit I deserved. Despite being undervalued, I kept a low profile and continued to work hard, hoping that one day my hard work would pay off. Buying lottery tickets was a little hobby of mine, a weekly ritual my family liked to tease. Every Friday, I would stop by the corner convenience store and spend $10 on tickets. My mother called it a tax on people who can't do math. My brother joked that I should give the money directly to him instead of wasting it. My father lectured me on probability and statistics. But there was something hopeful about those tickets. A small chance of escaping a financial burden that I couldn't let go of even as years passed, and I never won more than $20. I had dreams, of course. I wanted to travel to explore places beyond the Rocky Mountains. I wanted to go back to school, maybe get a master's degree in a field I was truly passionate about. I wanted to save enough money so that an unexpected car repair wouldn't send me into a financial tailspin. But those dreams seemed increasingly distant as I turned 38, still paying off student loans and carrying a small but persistent credit card debt that never seemed to go down no matter how carefully I budgeted. Each month was a delicate balance between bills, groceries, and the occasional dinner with Chloe. I had mastered the art of pretending everything was fine while constantly calculating the costs in my head, wondering if I could say yes to an invitation or if I needed to make up an excuse to stay home. This was my life before everything changed. Simple, sometimes difficult, sometimes lonely, but somehow stable. Little did I know that a small piece of paper was about to turn everything I knew about myself and the people I called family upside down. The day I bought the winning ticket turned out to be my 38th birthday. It was a Friday at the end of the month, and I had just had a particularly tiring week at work. My boss, Mr. Davies, had once again taken credit for an innovative teaching strategy I had devised that had saved the school thousands of dollars in materials costs. Feeling undervalued and unacknowledged was all too familiar, but on my birthday it was especially poignant. I wanted something to celebrate, even if it was just a small thing. Like every Friday, I stopped at Gus's convenience store on the corner. Gus was a kindly old man who had owned the store for over 30 years. He knew all his regular customers by name and always had a friendly greeting to share. "Happy birthday, Evelyn," Gus called out as I walked in, a gentle smile on his wrinkled face. "Thanks, Gus," I replied, managing a tired smile. "The usual and maybe one more for luck." I gave him $20 instead of the usual $10. "Fancy birthday money. Maybe it's your lucky day," he said, winking as he handed me the tickets. Instead of letting the machine randomly choose my numbers like usual, this time I had the idea to choose my own. I wanted numbers that had special meaning to me. I chose my birth, month and day, 10 and 4. Lily's birthday, 22. My parents' wedding day, before they divorced, 8. Aunt Clara's birthday, 15. And finally my best friend Chloe's birthday, 28. 6 numbers. 6 numbers that represent the most important people in my life, even the ones who have disappointed me. I hoped that these numbers would bring me a little special luck on my birthday. That evening I ordered takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant, opened the bottle of white wine Chloe had given me for my birthday, and settled in for a quiet night alone. The lottery draw was at 8 p.m., but I barely paid attention to it. I scrolled through social media, seeing posts of friends and acquaintances enjoying far more lavish birthday parties than I had. A feeling of loneliness and slight sadness crept in. At 8:30 p.m., I remembered the lottery tickets. Lazily, I picked up my phone to check the numbers, not expecting much as usual. I was used to winning a few dollars or nothing at all. The first number that appeared on the screen, 10. I smiled slightly. Number 2, 4. My heart rate started to speed up a little. Number 3, 22. My hands started to sweat a little. Number 4, 8. I held my breath. Number 5, 15. My whole body stiffened. The 6th and final number, 28. I stared at the phone screen, feeling as if time had stopped. It couldn't be. Surely I had misread something. I double-checked and double-checked. Dozens of times. My eyes were glued to the numbers, trying to find any discrepancies. But nothing. They matched perfectly. All 6 of them. I turned on the television, rewound the live lottery. I watched my numbers appear on the screen one by one. My hands were shaking so much, I dropped the remote. "No way," I whispered into the empty apartment. "No way." According to the lottery website, I was the sole winner of the $10 million jackpot. After taxes, the net amount would be about $6 million. An incredible amount for someone who had been excited that morning about a 10% off coupon for laundry detergent. $6 million. It was a huge number beyond my wildest dreams. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, my mind racing. I had won the lottery. My life had changed. But how a million questions swirled in my mind. I spent hours researching lottery winners online. What I found was disturbing. Stories of winners whose lives were shattered by unexpected windfalls, families torn apart by greed, friends and distant relatives appearing out of nowhere with tragic stories and begging hands, winners who went bankrupt within 5 years, even worse off than before they won. One article called the lottery the quickest way to lose everything you care about. By the time the sun rose, I had made my decision. I would take the money, but I would not tell anyone. Not my parents, not my siblings, not even Chloe, at least, not right away. I needed time to process this, to make a plan, to figure out what this money would mean for my life, before others tried to tell me what to do with it. I was tired of being used, of being controlled by other people's expectations. This time it was my life, my decision. I would be in control. That morning, for the first time in 3 years, I called in to take the day off from work. I couldn't go to school feeling like this. I needed the clarity, the focus to take the next step. I made an appointment with Richard Montgomery, a financial planning and estate law attorney in downtown Denver. His office was in a posh high-rise. As I sat in the waiting room dressed in my casual clothes, clutching my wallet with the winning ticket in it, I felt like a fraud. "Miss Reed, Mr. Richard greeted me, extending his hand. He was a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind expensive glasses. "How may I help you today?" I took a deep breath and placed the lottery ticket on his desk. "I need to know how to claim this money without anyone knowing it was me." His eyes widened for a moment as he examined the ticket. Then he nodded professionally. "I see. Well, you've come to the right place." For the next 2 hours, Richard explained my options. In our state, lottery winners can claim their prizes through trusts or legal entities that will keep their identities private. He outlined the process of setting up an anonymous trust, how taxes would work, and the importance of assembling a team of financial advisors to help manage such a large sum of money. The biggest mistake people make, he told me, is telling too many people too quickly. Once that happens, there's no going back. I nodded, relieved that my instincts were right. I want to do everything right. I don't want this money to ruin my life. As I left Richard's office with a complete file and a list of next steps, I felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. I had more money than I had ever dreamed of. However, I couldn't share this life-changing news with anyone. I would have to live a double life, pretending to be an ordinary elementary school teacher struggling financially while secretly being a millionaire. The secrecy was starting to weigh heavily on me, but I knew it was the only way to protect myself. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked closely with Richard to set up trusts, collect my winnings, and open investment accounts. We created a comprehensive financial plan that ensured that I would never have to worry about money again, even if I lived to be 100. The money was indeed in accounts under my control. However, my day-to-day life remained unchanged. I still went to work, still whined about bills to my coworkers, still drove my old Honda Civic. I couldn't suddenly change my routine, couldn't show up with a new car or expensive clothes without arousing suspicion. This secrecy began to weigh heavily on me. I often wondered about my family. Would they be happy for me if they knew? Would they respect my boundaries, or would they see me as nothing more than a walking ATM? These questions haunted me, and slowly an idea began to form. It was a bold, almost cruel idea, but I felt it was the only way to get the answers I needed. What if there was a way to know how my family would react to my newfound wealth without actually revealing it? What if I could test their nature before deciding who to share my secret with? The plan became clear one night as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I would create a scenario where I needed financial help. Not a huge amount, but significant enough to make them think. I would approach each family member with the same story, the same request, and see who would help me without the possibility of getting anything in return. Only then would I know who was worthy of being a part of my new life, a life where I would be free and no longer bound by expectations or exploitation. The next day, I met with Richard again to make sure my finances were properly secured before moving forward. We set up a diversified investment portfolio, set up trusts for future charitable giving, and created a modest personal account that would allow me to access the funds without raising suspicion. The bulk of the money was invested securely, untouchable by anyone but me. "Everything is in place," Evelyn Richard assured me, sliding a folder across his gleaming desk. "Your financial future is secure. You can quit your job tomorrow if you want." The thought was appealing, but I knew such a sudden change in lifestyle would raise a lot of questions. I wasn't ready to answer them. "I think I'll keep my job for a while," I replied. "At least until I figure things out." That evening, I invited Chloe over for dinner. As we sat on the small balcony of our apartment with glasses of wine, I decided to share part of my plan with her. I couldn't keep it all to myself forever, and I trusted her more than anyone. "I'm thinking of doing a kind of experiment with my family," I began cautiously. Chloe raised an eyebrow. "What kind of test I took?" A deep breath. "I'll tell them I lost my job and need financial help, just to see who actually cares enough to help me when I need it." Chloe's expression turned from curious to concerned. "Evelyn, that sounds a bit manipulative." "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm tired of always being the only one who helps when others need it," I said, not looking her in the eye. "I want to know who would be there for me if the situation were reversed." "But lying to test people, that's not like you at all." Chloe put down her glass. "Why don't you just ask them how they feel about you? Have an honest conversation." I laughed humorlessly. "Honestly, you know my family, Chloe. You saw how they treated me." "Still, this feels wrong." Chloe shook her head. "What are you trying to prove?" "I'm not trying to prove anything," I insisted, though that wasn't entirely true. "I just want to know who really cares about me and who just sees me as a resource." Chloe shook her head. "I think you're going to hurt yourself more than anyone else with this, but I know that. Look in your eyes. You've made up your mind." She was right. I'd spent the day crafting my story, making sure it was believable, but not so dramatic that it aroused suspicion. I would tell people that the marketing firm I worked for had suddenly shut down after losing its biggest client. I would say that I needed $5,000 to cover rent and medical expenses until I found a new position. It was a significant amount of money, but not outrageous and certainly not beyond the means of most of my family. I made a list of all the people I would approach: my mother Carol and stepfather Arthur, my father Frank and stepmother Brenda, my sister Sarah and her husband David, my brother Liam, my Aunt Clara, my Aunt Beatrice, and my cousin Mark. 10 people. All of them had come to me for help at some point. All of them had been supported, whether financially or emotionally, by me when they needed it. Now it was time to see if they could do the same for me. The next day, I rehearsed my story with Chloe, who reluctantly agreed to help despite her skepticism. "You need to sound genuinely distressed, but not desperate," she advised. "And be prepared with specific details about the company closing. They may ask a lot." I nodded, taking notes. "I'll say the CEO embezzled funds and the company is under investigation." That would explain why it happened so suddenly, and why I might not get my final paycheck. "What about finding a job?" Chloe asked. "They'll ask about that. I've been applying everywhere, but the job market is tough, especially for specialized accounting positions. I've had a few interviews, but nothing is solid yet. My emergency fund is depleted because of some recent medical tests for some troubling symptoms." I thought through every detail, crafting a scenario that would elicit sympathy without raising too many questions. As I finalized my plan, I felt a twinge of guilt. Was Chloe right? Was this manipulative and wrong? But then I remembered all the times I had drained my savings to help these same people, often at great personal cost, and my resolve hardened. This wasn't just about checking up on them. This was about protecting myself and my future. I made a list of predictions about how I thought each person would react. My mother would probably offer to help, but less than the amount I needed. My father would lecture me about financial responsibility, but maybe, with my list in hand and a heavy heart, I set my plan into action. I decided to call my mother first. Carol, who was always proud of her role as a mother, often reminded us of the sacrifices she had made to raise her children. I figured if anyone would help, it would be her. My hand shook slightly as I dialed her number. She answered on the 3rd ring, sounding distracted. "Mom," I began, trying to make my voice sound strained. "Evelyn, honey, what's wrong? You sound sad." Immediately, the concern in her voice sparked a glimmer of hope in me, a glimmer that I had tried to smother. I began to tell my carefully prepared story about the sudden closure of my business, the lost wages, and my precarious financial situation. As I spoke, I could hear her breathing change, becoming more anxious with each detail. "Oh, honey, that's terrible," she said when I was finished. "Have you filed for unemployment? What about your emergency fund?" I explained that unemployment benefits would take a few weeks to process, and that my emergency fund was depleted because of recent medical tests that revealed some troubling symptoms. I purposely left the symptoms unspecified, letting her imagination fill in the blanks. "I hate to ask this, Mom, but I need help. About $5,000 to cover rent and medical bills until I find a new job. I promise I'll pay you back as soon as I can." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, long enough for my heart to sink. "Oh, Evelyn," she said finally, her voice a little changed, a little defensive. "You know Arthur and I just put a deposit down on the lake house. We're a little tight on cash right now." The lake house, a luxury they'd talked about for months. I felt a pang in my chest. "Have you asked your dad or Sarah? David makes a lot of money at the architecture firm." "I was hoping to avoid asking you," I said honestly, "and Sarah has young children and private school fees." "Well, let me talk to Arthur and see if there's anything we can do," she said finally, her tone unpromising. "But I can't promise anything. You know how tight he is with money, especially when it comes to, you know." "I know. Arthur never considered me his responsibility. He made it clear from the beginning that his money was for my mother and any children they might have together. They never had any." "Yes, Mother. Just let me know as soon as possible. The rent is due next week." "I will, honey. And I'm sorry about your job. But it'll be okay. Maybe this is a sign that you should consider moving to a more stable career." After hanging up, I recorded her reaction in the diary I had started for this purpose. She expressed concern, but immediately tried to shift the responsibility to someone else. She didn't say no outright, but I suspected that her conversation with Arthur would conveniently result in them being unable to help. The next day I met my father Frank for coffee. I chose a public place, thinking he might be less likely to react negatively in such a setting. "You look tired," was his greeting as I sat down across from him. I gave him a weak smile and began my story. His face remained expressionless, as I spoke, occasionally nodding or frowning at some detail. When I finished asking for $5,000, he leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Evelyn, I've always taught you about financial responsibility," he began, switching to his teacherly tone. "This is why I told you to always have 6 months of living expenses saved." "Where's that plan?" "Life happens, Dad," I replied, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. "Medical bills, car repairs. Not everyone can afford to save that much money." He sighed heavily. "And now you expect someone else to save you. What about your spending habits? Do you really need that apartment in that neighborhood? What about that cable plan and streaming services?" For the next 20 minutes, he lectured me on financial planning, the job market, and the importance of living below your means. Not once did he offer any real help. "I'd love to help you, Evelyn, but Brenda and I are focused on our retirement right now. We can't draw on those funds. That would be financially irresponsible." He patted my hand condescendingly. "This will be a good learning experience for you. Sometimes we need to hit rock bottom before we make the necessary changes." I nodded, fighting back tears that were only partly an act. Even though I'd expected this reaction, hearing him so easily dismiss my needs was still painful. My sister Sarah was next. I drove to her beautiful suburban home on a Saturday afternoon. Her husband David was out golfing, giving us some privacy to talk. "Evelyn, what a surprise!" she exclaimed as she opened the door. "The kids are off to swimming lessons. Come on in." Her house was perfect, with expensive furniture and professionally framed family photos on every wall. As we sat in her luxurious kitchen sipping lattes from her commercial espresso machine, I told her about my situation. "Oh my God, it's terrible," she exclaimed, reaching across the granite countertop to take my hand. "I can't believe they just closed like that. I feel so sorry for you." Her sympathy seemed genuine, and for a moment I felt hope. Then I mentioned needing to borrow $5,000. "Oh," she said, her expression changing slightly. "Well, this really isn't a good time. We just bought a new Audi last month and the kids' tuition is due. Plus, we're redoing the master bathroom." She glanced around nervously. "David handles most of our finances and he's very strict about our budget." "I understand," I said softly. "I wouldn't ask if I weren't so desperate." I know," she said quickly. "Let me talk to David and see if there's anything we can do. Maybe we can help out a little more. Or maybe you could move in with us temporarily. The living room is being used as storage, but we can clear that out." I thanked her for the offer, but explained that moving would be difficult when my job search was centered in the city. She promised to call me back after she talked to David, but the way she avoided eye contact said all I needed to know. But perhaps the most frustrating was my brother Liam. After I sent him a detailed text about my situation, he responded with a terse, "Sucks, sis. I'm stuck too. Call you later." He never called. My subsequent texts went unanswered, and when I tried to call him directly, the calls went straight to voicemail. This was the brother who had borrowed thousands of dollars from me over the years, always with tearful promises of repayment that never materialized. His silence, his utter indifference was more painful than any rejection. It was confirmation that to him I only existed because I had something to give. By the end of the first day of the experiment, I felt emotionally drained. The 4 people closest to me, to whom I had sacrificed so much, were unable or unwilling to help. The harsh truth began to sink in, and it was more painful than I had imagined. After the backlash from my immediate family, I went ahead with my plan with a sense of almost resignation. I had braced myself for the worst, but I had no idea that the worst was yet to come. My stepmother Brenda was blunt when I called her, not even pretending to be sympathetic. "Evelyn, I'm sure this is hard, but Frank and I are not in a position to help. Maybe this is an opportunity for you to learn better financial management skills. Have you considered moving into a smaller apartment or finding a roommate?" When I pointed out that I had helped them renovate their vacation home last year, she became angry. "That's different. It's family property that you get to use, too." The fact that I'd only been invited to the house once every 5 years didn't seem to matter. My stepfather Arthur was worse. "You are not my daughter," he said bluntly when I called. "I have supported your mother for years, but your financial problems are your own. You should have chosen a more lucrative career path." His words were cold and cruel without a trace of affection. I hung up feeling as if I had been splashed with cold water. My cousin Mark initially seemed sympathetic, promising that he would definitely help. He even offered to meet for lunch to give me a check. But when the day arrived, he texted an hour before to say something had come up and he would reschedule. He never rescheduled and eventually stopped responding to my texts altogether. His broken promises, his lack of respect for my time and situation showed that he was no different than the rest of them. Aunt Beatrice's response was perhaps the least surprising but still painful. "Well, Evelyn, I've always said your company seemed unstable. I told your father that you should take a job in a bank after college, but no one listened to me." She then proceeded to tell me about all the financial troubles other family members had gone through and how they had overcome them without having to beg for help. To make matters worse, a few days later, I heard from my mother that Aunt Beatrice was spreading rumors about my financial irresponsibility, making my story a topic of gossip at family gatherings. After a week of rejection, false promises, and complete silence, I felt emotionally drained. The ordeal had confirmed my worst fears about my family, but the reality was far more painful than I could have imagined. 7 people who had repeatedly asked for and received my help over the years were either unable or unwilling to respond when I needed them. I sat alone in my apartment, feeling more alone and betrayed than ever. Then my phone rang. It was Aunt Clara. "Evelyn, honey, I just heard your mother talking about work. Are you okay?" Her voice was warm and full of genuine concern. I hadn't contacted Aunt Clara yet, planning to call her the next day. The fact that she called me first after hearing about my situation from someone else said a lot. "I'm fine, Auntie," I said, the emotion in my voice now completely genuine. "Listen, I want to help. Can we meet for lunch tomorrow? You're welcome, of course." The next day, we met at a small diner near my aunt's apartment. Aunt Clara looked as usual, her silver hair tied back in a ponytail, wearing jeans and a sweater with uneven buttons. She hugged me tightly before we sat down. "I'm sorry about your job, honey. That company was never worth it." As we ate, she asked thoughtful questions about my job search and suggested contacting some former colleagues who had connections in the business world. Then, after our plates were cleared, she reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "I want you to take this," she said, sliding it across the table. "Here's $3,000. I know it's not all you need, but it'll at least help you pay your rent." I stared at the envelope in amazement. "Aunt Clara, I can't accept this. This is too much." "Nonsense," she said firmly. "Families are meant to help each other. And I want you to know one more thing." She reached across the table and took my hand. "If you need a place to stay to save on rent, my sofa can be pulled out into a bed. It's not fancy, but you're welcome to stay there as long as you like." Tears welled up in my eyes, and this time they were real. "Thank you," I whispered, overwhelmed by her generosity. "Now don't worry about paying this money back right away," she continued. "Get on your feet first. Find a job you actually love this time. Life is too short to work somewhere that doesn't appreciate you." As we left the diner, Aunt Clara hugged me again. "You'll be fine, Evelyn. You're smart and capable. It's just going to be a bumpy ride." Driving home, I clutched the envelope containing $3,000, an amount I knew Aunt Clara would have trouble with. The contrast between her reaction and the rest of my family couldn't have been more stark. The only person who offered genuine help was the one who had the least to give. In that moment, amid the pain of betrayal, I felt a glimmer of gratitude and hope. I had found someone, just one person, but that person was all I needed. After meeting Aunt Clara, I did something I should have done a long time ago. I really learned about her life. Not through the one-sided stories my family told me, but on my own. I knew she had severe arthritis, but I had never really understood what that meant. A few quick searches online opened up a world of pain and expense I had never imagined. I found information about new medications, cutting-edge treatments, all at exorbitant prices that my retired teacher's insurance could hardly cover. I discovered that her prescription costs had nearly doubled in the past year, and that she had secretly taken on an online tutoring job to cover the costs. This knowledge hit me like a punch in the gut. Aunt Clara, who had so little, had given almost everything she had unabashedly, unconditionally, while she was dealing with her own burdens. Meanwhile, my mother, who had just spent over $10,000 on a bathroom remodel, couldn't spare $5,000 to help her daughter with rent and medical bills. The contrast was too stark, too painful. It was no longer an experiment. It had become a hard truth about the nature of relationships in my life. I felt anger and sadness, but above all, a deep sense of gratitude and fierce determination. I couldn't let Aunt Clara's sacrifice be based on a lie. The very next day, I invited my aunt to my apartment for dinner. I cooked her favorite lasagna, the one she taught me to make when I was a little girl. As she sat on my worn sofa, I noticed for the first time how tired she looked, the lines around her eyes deeper than I remembered. "Aunt Clara, I need to tell you something." I began, placing a cup of hot tea in front of her. "I haven't been completely honest with you." Her expression remained open, more curious than concerned. "What is it, dear?" "I didn't lose my job." The words came out quickly. "The company is fine. I still have a job. I made that story up to see who in my family would help me if I needed it." Aunt Clara was silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I understand. Are you mad at me?" I asked, suddenly afraid of losing the only genuine relationship I had discovered through this experiment. She thought about the question. "No, not angry. Maybe sad. Sad that you feel the need to test people this way." She took a sip of tea. "But I understand why you do it. Our family hasn't always been kind to you." "You're the only one who's offered to help," I told her, my voice choked up. Everyone else either had their own excuses or ignored me completely. Aunt Clara sighed. "People show you who they are when giving becomes inconvenient. I learned that lesson the hard way myself." "What do you mean?" She put down her teacup and clasped her hands together. "My ex-husband, Robert. Did I ever tell you why we actually got divorced?" I shook my head. The family story was always vague, just didn't get along anymore. "I inherited a small sum of money when my grandmother died," she began. "About $50,000. Not a fortune, but a considerable sum for us at the time. Robert immediately had all these plans for the money, mostly investing it in his friend's business ventures." She smiled bitterly. "I wanted to save it for our future, maybe buy a small house. We argued about it for months. What happened? One day I found out that he had forged my signature and withdrawn most of the money. When I found out it was too late, the money had been invested in a restaurant that went bankrupt within a year." She shook her head as she recalled. "When I confronted him, do you know what he said? That it was Munyer, not just yours, and he has the same right to it as you. As if your name on the inheritance papers means nothing." I was shocked. I didn't know that. "The family prefers the incompatible story. It's less messy," she said. She reached out and took my hand. "The thing is, I learned that some people see you as a resource rather than a person, and that was a painful lesson. I'm sorry that happened to you." "I'm so sorry that happened to you," I said, squeezing her hand. "It was a long time ago, but it taught me something important about money and relationships," she said, looking at me intently. "Money doesn't just reveal who other people really are, Evelyn. It reveals who we are. How we use it, how we share it, how we talk about it. It's a powerful mirror." Her words resonated deeply with me. In that moment, I made a decision. "Aunt Clara, there's something else I need to tell you. Something big." I took a deep breath. 3 weeks ago, I won the lottery. $10 million. Her eyes widened, but she remained silent, waiting for me to continue. "I haven't told anyone else. Not my parents, not Liam or Sarah, not even Chloe. You're the first one to know." "Oh, Evelyn," she breathed. That was life-changing." "I know. And that's why I took this test. I needed to know who would be there for me without knowing about the money." Aunt Clara nodded slowly. "I understand that. But what are you going to do now? That's what I'm trying to figure out. The money is secured and I have good financial advisors. But I don't know how to handle my family." Aunt Clara thought about this. "You know you don't owe anyone anything, Evelyn. Not even me. But I want to help you," I insisted. "Your medical bill's a better apartment. Whatever you need." She smiled gently. "I don't need anything from you, honey. I'm happy with my life. My apartment is small, but it's filled with things I love. My car still runs well. I have my students and my books, and now this wonderful secret with my precious niece." She patted my hand. "Just knowing you're safe and happy is enough for me." Her selflessness brought tears to my eyes. Here was someone who had given me almost everything she had when she thought I needed it, and now asked for nothing when she knew I had millions of dollars. As we continued to talk into the evening, the contrast between Aunt Clara and the rest of my family became more apparent. While I was conducting my experiment, rumors of my financial troubles had been circulating in the family. Instead of causing concern, they had mostly created gossip and judgment. My phone buzzed with a text message from my mother. "I heard you were asking Sarah for money too." You should have told me you were asking everyone. It felt like you were taking advantage of us. Another text message came from my father. Brenda told me you were calling everyone for money. This is exactly the kind of irresponsible behavior I warned you about. My family turned my request for help into evidence of my character flaws, rather than an opportunity to show compassion. And in doing so, they revealed everything I needed to know about the true nature of our relationships. The morning after my conversation with Aunt Clara, I met with Richard to discuss my long-term financial plans. Now that I had clarity about my family relationships, I could make decisions about my future with clarity. I want to set up a trust fund for my Aunt Clara Reed, I told him. Something that will cover her medical expenses and provide her with a comfortable retirement, but in a way that feels more like a gift than a charity. She has a lot of self-respect. Richard nodded, taking notes. We could structure it as a family trust that provides a monthly stipend. She wouldn't have to manage a large sum of money all at once, which can be overwhelming for someone unfamiliar with wealth. Perfect. And I want to buy her a small house near where I decide to live. Nothing fancy, just comfortable and accessible for someone with health issues. We spent the next hour discussing investment strategies, charities, and my own living situation. I decided to quit teaching and focus on starting a nonprofit to help seniors living alone, inspired by Aunt Clara's situation and many others like her. What about the rest of your family? Richard asked cautiously. Are you going to tell them about the victory? I shook my head. Not now. Maybe never. But I would like to schedule a family meeting to clear things up about my financial troubles. Later that day, I called Chloe and finally told her the truth about everything, the lottery win and the family experiment. After the initial shock, she understood why I had kept it a secret. So what now? She asked. Are you going to be one of those weirdo millionaires who still clip coupons and drive a beat-up car? I laughed. No, but I'm not going to suddenly start buying Bentleys either. I want this money to be meaningful, to do good things, starting with Aunt Clara. She deserves it, Chloe agreed. What about the others, the ones who failed your test? I'm still figuring it out. I called a family meeting this weekend. I told them I have an important announcement. When Sunday arrived, I was surprised to find everyone at my apartment. My mother and Arthur, my father and Brenda, Sarah and David, even Liam, who had been ignoring my calls for weeks. Aunt Beatrice arrived with a disapproving frown already on her face. Aunt Clara arrived last, giving me a secret smile as she entered. As everyone settled into my small living room, looking around with varying degrees of curiosity and judgment, I stood before them feeling a strange calm. Thank you all for coming, I began. I know there have been rumors circulating about my financial situation, and I wanted to address them directly. My mother shifted uncomfortably. Liam suddenly seemed very interested in his phone. Sarah and David exchanged glances. The truth is, I'm fine. I found a new job with better pay and benefits. This was technically true since I had just appointed myself CEO of my new fund with a modest salary. I'll be moving into that position next month. Well, that's great news, my mother said with obvious relief. We were all so worried. I noticed a few faces relax in the room. They had come expecting to be asked for money again, or perhaps to stage some kind of intervention about my financial habits. Instead, they received good news that required nothing of them. Then why make a fuss about needing money? My father asked, his tone accusing. Why ask everyone for help if you already have a new job? I looked him straight in the eye. The new job came recently, and when I was in trouble, I turned to my family. That's what family's all about, right? An awkward silence fell over the room. Well, we all have our own financial commitments, Brenda said defensively. We can't always help out, even if we wanted to. Of course, I agreed. We all have to make choices about our priorities. I turned to Liam. Speaking of which, Liam, I noticed you never responded to my texts when I needed help. However, you had no problem asking me for $3,000 last Christmas to pay rent. He had the decency to look embarrassed. I'm going through some things and I don't have the money to give you. You didn't even call me back, I pointed out. That was completely free. The meeting continued in this vein with me, calmly but firmly pointing out the hypocrisy and lack of support I had experienced. No one admitted any wrongdoing. There were excuses, justifications, and even some attempts to blame me for making people feel guilty. As they filed out after an uncomfortable hour, I felt a strange sense of closure. I didn't tell them about the lottery win, but I stood up for myself in a way I had never done before. The money had given me something perhaps more valuable than wealth, the courage to look at my relationships clearly and set appropriate boundaries. Aunt Clara stayed after everyone had left, helping me clear away the coffee cups and plates. "You did well," she said softly. "It must have been hard." "It was easier than I thought," I replied. For the first time, I wasn't afraid to disappoint them because I realized that their opinion of me was never based on who I really was. Aunt Clara smiled. "That's a powerful realization. So, what happens next?" "Next," I said, a smile finally appearing on my lips, "we'll start looking for a home. For both of us." A year later, my life was very different from the day I discovered those lucky numbers. I had moved to a beautiful but modest house in a quiet neighborhood with a backyard that I tended every morning, finding joy in the simple things. Just 3 blocks away was Aunt Clara's new house. It was a craftsman-style one-story house with wide doors to accommodate her wheelchair on days when her arthritis was bad. We had designed it together, making sure every detail was comfortable and functional. For the first time in decades, she had a place she could truly call home, a place of safety and peace. My nonprofit, the Second Family Project, has grown beyond my wildest dreams. We provide companionship, home repairs, and financial assistance to seniors living alone, with a special focus on those who have been estranged or abandoned by their families. This work has a deeper meaning than my teaching career ever could. Every day I hear stories, share laughter, and sometimes tears with people who have been forgotten by society. We have helped over 200 seniors in the city, and every success story, every grateful smile is a reminder that I put this money to good use. Chloe, after months of thinking, finally decided to quit her nursing job and join my organization as an outreach coordinator. Her medical expertise and compassionate nature have become invaluable assets to our mission. We still have our weekly wine nights, but now they take place on my comfortable patio overlooking the blooming garden rather than in our cramped apartment. My relationship with my family had shifted to a different state, more distant but also more honest. I still maintained occasional contact with most of them, polite birthday calls, holiday get-togethers, but the veneer of intimacy had evaporated. Without the expectation of an emotional closeness that had never really existed, our interactions became less painful. None of them knew about my lottery win. To them, I had simply found success with a new career in nonprofit management. They seemed to accept this explanation without much curiosity about the details, which told me all I needed to know about their interest in my life. There were times when I was tempted to reveal the truth, especially when Liam called this time to borrow money for a surefire business venture, or when Sarah whined about the cost of her kitchen remodel, implying that I was lucky to no longer have to worry about money. But each time I remembered the silence when I needed help, the judgment when I was weak, and the choice became clear. My silence was not a punishment but a protection of the peace I had worked so hard to earn. Interestingly, there have been occasions when family members have genuinely needed support. When my father suffered a mild heart attack and faced unexpected medical bills, I quietly paid them through the hospital's patient assistance fund. When my cousin Mark ended up in rehab for his gambling addiction, I made an anonymous donation to cover his medical expenses. They never knew the source of these gifts, and I loved that. It allowed me to help without being pulled back into an unhealthy cycle of expectation and responsibility. It was kindness on my own terms, unfettered by guilt or obligation. Aunt Clara and I have dinner together at least twice a week. Her health has improved dramatically thanks to better medical care and less financial stress. She has retired from teaching, but volunteers at a literacy program 3 days a week, continuing to share her love of books with children who need it. "You know what still amazes me," she said one evening as we sat on her porch watching the sunset. "How things could have turned out differently if you had announced your lottery win from the beginning." I nodded, contemplating that parallel reality. "I guess the family would suddenly become very caring and loving," I imagined. "And you will never know what is true," Aunt Clara added. "That knowledge, painful as it is, has set you free." She was right. The experience was painful, but it was enlightening. It showed me who deserved a place in my life and who didn't. It exposed the true nature of relationships I had spent years trying to make work despite their underlying imbalances. The greatest lesson I learned was not about other people, but about myself. Before winning the lottery, I defined my worth by what I could give. I was constantly trying to earn love through sacrifice and generosity. I allowed myself to be taken advantage of because I believed that was what family was about. That was what love required. Now, I understand that real love, the kind that Aunt Clara showed me, doesn't keep a balance sheet. It gives freely without expectation of return, but it also respects boundaries and dignity. It is honest and consistent, present in good times and bad. At first, I kept my success a secret out of fear, worried that money would ruin my relationships. What I didn't anticipate was that the secret would unravel them, strip away the pretense, and reveal the truth. Money doesn't change anyone. It simply illuminates who they've always been. My life is now rich in ways that have nothing to do with my bank account. I have purpose through my foundation, a genuine connection to Aunt Clara and Chloe, and a deep sense of self-worth that no amount of external validation can shake. Perhaps most importantly, I have peace. The constant financial anxiety that had been my lifelong companion is gone. But with it, my desperate need for approval from people who can't give it. I have built a life that is aligned with my values, not my insecurities. Aunt Clara reached over and patted my hand, bringing me back to the present moment. "You did very well, little girl. Not just with the money, but with what you learned." I smiled at my aunt, filled with gratitude for the woman who had shown me the true meaning of family. "You had a good teacher." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From the shock of the matching numbers, to the pain of rejection, to the joy of creating something meaningful from my unexpected fortune. Money had changed my life, yes, but not in the ways I had initially feared or hoped. It had simply given me the freedom to see clearly and choose wisely. The most valuable thing I have ever acquired has nothing to do with millions of dollars in the bank. It is the understanding that the people who deserve a place in your life are not the ones who are there when you have everything to give, but the ones who stay when you have nothing to give but yourself. And that, my friends, is my story. A story that began with a lottery ticket but ended with a profound exploration of love, loss, and true wealth. Thank you for listening. And I hope that wherever you are in your journey, you find clarity to recognize the true relationships in your own life.